Malachi Brooks had been living a quiet, solitary life ever since he lost everything that mattered to him. The sun was setting over the Wyoming plains, casting long, fading shadows across the abandoned ranch he had recently bought for pennies. No one wanted this place. The land had been forsaken for years, and the stories surrounding it were dark enough to keep even the most ambitious settlers away. Free land, they said. Free because it had a history no one wanted to relive. But Malachi was different. He had nothing left to lose. And so, with a thick set of papers signed and an ironclad determination to make something out of nothing, he moved in. The well was the first thing that stood out to him. According to the deed, it was dry. A well that had been drained long before Malachi had come, a symbol of the place's wasted potential. It should have been a perfectly reasonable thing to accept. The well was dry, the land was barren, and there was nothing more to expect from the property. But that day, when he lowered his rope into that dry well, something different happened. As he lowered the rope, a strange metallic scraping sound echoed from deep below. The kind of noise a man would expect to hear only in the belly of an old mine or deep in the belly of the earth. But this was a well, and it wasn't supposed to make such noises. Malachi pulled the rope up carefully, his calloused fingers working methodically. The bucket came up slower than expected, heavier than it should have been, as if it were weighted with something more than just water. He set it down hard on the cracked earth and stared. His mind raced as he peered inside the bucket, expecting to find dirt or old debris. Instead, he found something else. Water. Clear, sparkling water, shimmering under the setting sun's rays like it had been sitting there for centuries, waiting for someone to notice. But it wasn't just water that filled the bucket. There was something else. Something strange caught at the bottom of the bucket, something metallic, glinting in the sunlight. Malachi's heart skipped a beat as he reached down to grab it. His hand closed around the object, warm to the touch, warmer than it should have been after sitting in the cold water. A coin. It was old, worn smooth on one side, the markings barely legible. Malachi turned it over in his hand, studying the strange symbols etched into the metal. They didn't look like anything he recognized. It wasn't a coin from anywhere he'd seen before. He'd worked farms and ranches from the edge of the territory to the border, and never had he seen anything like this. It was as if the coin itself didn't belong in this world. He couldn't explain it, but something about it felt wrong. The coin was heavy, denser than gold should be, as if it was made from something entirely different. The weight settled in his palm like a hidden secret, making him feel both curious and apprehensive. He had been taught to avoid complications, and yet here was something so strange, so out of place, that it filled him with both fascination and dread. He looked back down at the well. There had to be more down there. If this one coin was there, it was possible that others were waiting to be found. And if there were more coins, it might explain why this ranch had been abandoned so suddenly. Why Sterling Boone, the man who had owned it before him, had disappeared without a trace. Why the locals avoided speaking about this place. He pocketed the coin and tied the rope again, the familiar sense of dread slowly building within him as he prepared to lower the bucket once more. Before he could release the rope, he heard a voice from behind him, a voice that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." Malachi spun around to face the newcomer, his hand instinctively reaching for his rifle. A woman. She was maybe 40, with steel-gray hair pulled back tightly and eyes that seemed to hold the weight of secrets. Her clothes were practical, though well-made, and she carried herself like someone used to dealing with difficult situations. She was a rider, no doubt about that. But something about her presence made Malachi uneasy. "I'm Sister Catherine McKenna," she said, her Irish accent cutting through the Wyoming air. "I own the spread just east of here. Been watching you since you arrived." Malachi glanced at her with suspicion. "You've been watching me? What for?" "Malachi Brooks," she continued, unfazed by his gruff tone. "I know who you are. What brings you to this place?" Malachi didn't trust her. He didn't trust anyone, especially not someone showing up out of nowhere on his land, just as he was starting to make sense of it all. "Just trying to get some water," he said, his voice steady, though he felt the weight of the coin in his pocket pressing against him. "Man's got to drink." Sister Catherine approached the well, her gaze never leaving the dark opening as she spoke. "That well's been trouble since the day it was dug. Sterling Boone learned that the hard way." "What happened to Boone?" Malachi asked, though a part of him already suspected he didn't want to hear the answer. "No one knows for certain," she said, eyes fixed on the darkness below. "One day he was here, working the land, talking about striking it rich. The next day, he was gone, left everything behind. Clothes still hanging in the house, food still on the table, horse still in the corral." Malachi's chest tightened at her words, but he tried to stay calm. "Maybe he just decided to move on. Man's got a right to change his mind." Sister Catherine shook her head slowly, her eyes dark with unspoken knowledge. "Sterling Boone wasn't the type to run from anything. He was the kind of man who'd fight a mountain if it got in his way. But something about this place changed him those last few weeks. Something about that well." She pointed down at the well, and Malachi's unease deepened. As he stared at the dark hole in the ground, something inside him told him that whatever had happened to Boone wasn't just about bad luck. Something darker lingered here. "What kind of trouble are we talking about?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "The kind that makes a man disappear in the middle of the night, leaving behind everything he ever cared about," she replied, her voice soft but firm. "Sterling started acting strange about 6 weeks before he vanished. Stopped coming to town for supplies, stopped talking to his neighbors. When folks did see him, he looked like he hadn't slept in days." Malachi shifted uncomfortably. He could feel the strange coin in his pocket burning hotter against his skin. Maybe he was just working hard. Ranch life can wear a man down. Sister Catherine was unrelenting. "This was different. My farmhand, Jebediah, came by to help Sterling with some fence repairs. Found him sitting right here by this well, talking to himself. Not just mumbling, mind you, having full conversations like someone was talking back." Malachi stood still, frozen by the weight of her words. The thought of someone, anyone, talking to something in the well sent a shiver down his spine. He didn't want to believe it, but everything about the situation, every word from her mouth, pointed toward something impossible. Malachi felt a cold gust of wind brush past him as Sister Catherine's words sank deeper into his mind. A well that made men disappear, a strange coin, and a ranch full of secrets that should have stayed buried. His life had just turned into something he hadn't expected when he signed the papers 3 days ago. Sister Catherine's voice interrupted his thoughts. Sterling kept talking about finding something that would change everything, make him the richest man in the territory. But when Jebediah asked him what he'd found, Sterling would just smile and say the well was telling him secrets. Malachi felt a familiar weight in his pocket, where the strange coin burned against his skin. He knew, in that moment, that the well wasn't just a source of water. It was a portal to something far darker. Sister Catherine stepped back, her eyes never leaving the black hole in front of them. Whatever Sterling found, it wasn't just treasure. It was something that pulled him into madness. I'd bet my last coin he thought he had uncovered something no one else could touch. Malachi swallowed hard, the air around him thick with an invisible weight. His hands trembled slightly, and for the first time, he considered leaving the ranch, walking away from everything he'd worked for. But the pull of the well and the strange coin he had found made it impossible to turn back. Maybe he was just crazy, Malachi muttered, trying to convince himself more than anyone else. "Maybe," she replied. "But there's something about this land, Malachi, something that's been here far longer than we have. Sterling Boone wasn't the first to come here looking for riches. And he won't be the last. The silence between them felt endless as Malachi stared into the darkness of the well. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of horses approaching. The rhythmic clip-clop of hooves reached them before they saw the riders. Sister Catherine's expression darkened. "We should leave," she said urgently, turning toward her horse. "The well has a way of attracting unwanted attention. People like Fletcher Knox don't take kindly to anyone finding what they think belongs to them." Malachi turned to face her, the cold coin in his pocket seeming to burn hotter by the second. "Who's Fletcher Knox?" Sister Catherine hesitated, her lips pressed tight as if weighing whether to tell him. Finally, she sighed. "Fletcher Knox is the leader of a group that's been running a smuggling operation through this area for years. They use the well to lure people in, keep them distracted long enough to make sure they don't get too close to the truth." "The truth about what?" She looked at him with a gaze that seemed to pierce through him. "The well isn't just a well. It's been used for generations as a storage place, for contraband, for things that people would kill to keep hidden. Those coins you've been finding? They're a payment, not treasure." Malachi's mind raced. "Who's paying for these coins? Who are they paying?" "The coins are a form of currency," Sister Catherine replied, her voice tense. "They're used to silence people, to buy their loyalty, to keep certain families quiet about what's really going on around here. Those who disappear, those who go looking for treasure, they're never seen again because they start asking questions no one wants answered." Malachi felt a chill run through him. His mind flashed back to the note he had found in the well earlier, the note from Sterling Boone. The last part of it had given him a clear warning. "They're watching. They know what I found. If something happens to me, look for the real treasure in the old church foundation." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the gold coin, staring at it in the dimming sunlight. "And what does this coin have to do with it?" Sister Catherine paused. "The coins are bait. They draw people in, just like they did with Sterling. But when the people realize what they've really found, they get too close to the truth. And the truth can't be allowed to get out. Too many powerful people would lose everything." Before Malachi could respond, the sound of horses grew louder and 4 riders emerged from the distance. Malachi could see them clearly now, and he immediately recognized the leader. The tall man was wearing a long coat, his face darkened by the shadows, but there was no mistaking the cold, calculating look in his eyes. Sister Catherine's expression tightened. "You need to leave. Now." But Malachi was rooted in place, his gaze fixed on the approaching riders. He knew who they were now. They weren't ordinary ranchers or settlers. These men were part of something much larger, and he had unwittingly stumbled upon a secret he wasn't prepared to face. The leader of the riders, Fletcher Knox, halted his horse just a few feet away. "Well, well," he said, his voice dripping with false politeness. "It seems we have a trespasser." His eyes flicked over to Malachi, who stood frozen in place, his hand still clutching the strange coin. "Get off my land," Malachi said, his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. The words felt weak, even to him. He wasn't sure how to stop these men, but he wasn't going to back down either. Fletcher's smile didn't reach his eyes. "You know, Malachi, this land isn't really yours. Not yet, at least. You've been here, what? 3 days? We've been waiting for someone like you to show up, someone who could take the blame for what's been happening here." Malachi's pulse quickened. "I'm not sure what you're talking about." "Oh, I think you do," Fletcher replied, his voice dark and amused. "You found the coins, didn't you?" Malachi's hand instinctively went to his pocket, where the coin still burned against his skin. He could feel their eyes on him, waiting for his answer. "I found a coin, but it's not what you think." Fletcher's gaze hardened, his smile gone. "It's exactly what I think, Malachi. And now, you're going to help us." "Help you? I don't owe you anything." "You owe us everything because you've been digging around where you shouldn't be," Fletcher said, his voice lowering to a threatening tone. "You see, this land and the well aren't just for treasure hunters. They're for people who know how to keep their mouths shut. And you've made the mistake of poking around in things you don't understand." One of the other riders dismounted, walking toward Malachi with a menacing look in his eyes. Malachi's hand instinctively went to his rifle, but before he could reach it, Fletcher raised his hand, signaling the man to stop. "Listen carefully, Malachi," Fletcher said, his voice low. "We're not asking you to cooperate. We're telling you. You found something that needs to be kept quiet, and now you have a choice. You can walk away, sign a few papers, and pretend none of this ever happened. Or we can make sure you disappear, just like Sterling Boone did." Malachi's eyes narrowed, his pulse pounding in his ears. He didn't trust these men, and he certainly wasn't going to let them control his fate. But the fear in his chest grew as the reality of the situation set in. These weren't just regular ranchers. These were dangerous men who would stop at nothing to protect the secrets hidden beneath the well. He took a step back, his mind racing for a way out. But as he glanced around, his eyes fell on something that made his heart stop. A lone figure riding toward them from the distance. A rider who wasn't one of Fletcher's men.